Welcome back to the Dynasty Market Watch, where yesterday's price is not today's price. I'm Todd. You can find me on Twitter at DynastySFlex, Matt at Dynasty Peasant, and Brian is here at Brian_Leary1. Man, this has been a tough week of injuries, tough season of injuries. We're just like, everybody's getting ravaged right now. We had Nico Collins go on the IR today. Michael Pittman's probably headed to the IR. James Cook now with turf toe. Sounds like Malik Neighbors might miss another week. Like, we are all just hanging by a thread with our contenders right now. Let's start talking right off the bat, Nico Collins, because that's the biggest one. Like, if you're a contender, like, you're definitely a contender with Nico Collins. Come on. Like, he has been just dominating for us. Brian, we're beating the drum for Nico Collins. What do you think this does to his dynasty value? Like, do you think that he's gettable now?
Yes. I saw a trade today that was for Nico Collins. Our friend Bryce actually got Nico Collins in a deal. I'll pull it up later. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but it seemed pretty fair, but probably not something that was out there, like you're saying, like a week ago. If he was fully healthy, I think Nico was a pretty close to untradeable asset.
He was like a top five. I mean, he is top 5 wide receiver, top 4, top 3, somewhere in there to most people.
Yeah, and just like on a personal level, he's on 20% of my teams, and I'm kind of feeling like the Civil War soldier that has like the bandaged head that's walking around playing flute because he can't participate any longer. That's what a lot of my contending teams unfortunately feel like with all of these guys that you just listed. So I'm sure a lot of people are in the same boat.
Yeah, I've Nico on 31% of my teams, and last week I traded Jamar Chase straight up for Nico Collins on a contender, so
ouch.
That did not feel great this week, but thought it was a good move at the time. But yeah, go ahead, Todd.
So I actually offered for Nico just yesterday when the news came out that he was like week to week, probably for sure going to miss a week, maybe 2. And so I offered Lamb and Rico Dowdle for Nico in a second. And I had that offer out there overnight, and then in comes the IR for Nico update. And I go in and I hit withdraw on the trade offer because, like, at this point, I'm gonna now have to move Lamb back well ahead of Nico. I mean, it would probably be like, for me, Lamb for Nico in a second. So I guess I'm ultimately was only giving away like a free Rico Dowdle, but he's been kind of decent here recently and seems to be taking away work from Zeke each and every week.
Matt, hit us with something Rico Dowdle hated.
No, I'm coming around on Rico. Like, I didn't expect him to have that good of a game against Pittsburgh run defense. So he looked pretty good. I guess see how it goes. If I have Rico on a few teams and I'm not looking to shop him. Whereas like a month ago I was like asking for any third I could get and was getting rejected.
I'm going to say this, and again, this is something that hits home for me, and it's going to be somewhat personal and maybe not fully factual based. But if Rico Dowdle succeeds in the Dallas offense and Tony Pollard didn't, I'm going to have a lot of heartburn for the next few years.
I'm going to have more heartburn if we keep talking about Rico Dowdle.
Yeah,
so
fair.
Here's the question. Here's the question that I have for both of you all before we get to Fat Joe. If you have a Lamb, Chase, let's use Lamb or Chase for this exercise. You have a Lamb or Chase on a rebuild. What do you need on top of Nico to make that swap?
I don't think there's going to be a massive market unless like I know he just went on IR, so I guess it would be someone that really is desperate to win now.
I think most people are pretty desperate at this point.
Yeah, fair. So I'll say a second for me. That's all it take for me. Like if I'm rebuilding, I would do it 1-to-1, honestly. But yeah,
I don't really get the point of just giving someone the opportunity to continue to contend when there's a case to be made that Lamb or Chase are ahead of him. Like they're the same tier, but like
but you can also look back on last year when we talked about the Jamar Chase Jefferson swaps, right? Like that was like, wait, why the hell are you doing that? Like, and now I couldn't be happier. I made like 3 or 4 of those swaps where I traded Jamar Chase for Justin Jefferson after he got hurt So like to me, like I see this
probably a little different because you were talking about Justin Jefferson. He's obviously like the best wide receiver in the world.
Yeah, but like the case remains that like if you think I'm not telling anyone to think the way that I think, but I think they're pretty even. That if I can get, like you're saying, any type of anything added on, great. But like if not, I'm tanking points and I get a similar receiver. That sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be a lot for me. Like a second seems fine.
Second is what I would need. Otherwise, like, why am I helping this guy out if I'm not going to get like, or if it's like a couple thirds or like a third, like and a backup running back, I got to get like I'm not just going to like toss you a free bone just because you guys.
Yeah. I'm kind of like in the middle. Like I see where Brian's coming from because it is beneficial to you to not have those points and get a similar quality player for 2025 and beyond. But tiebreaker goes to the like rebuild team basically. Like if you're contending, yeah, you got to throw me something here. But yeah, I agreed. It wouldn't take a whole lot.
All right, and with that, Brian, play that Fat Joe.
Yesterday's price is not today's price.
So we've talked a bunch of injuries. Let's like do something a little bit less depressing. And let's talk about someone, and I'm going to kick it off, bull or bear. Let's talk about someone that is crushing it right now, and that's Brian Thomas Jr. So Brian Thomas Jr., I think his value, well, first off, it's surging. So I think that he's just rocketing up. And the people that have him are probably not really wanting to move him. So this isn't necessarily like, hey, go out and buy Brian Thomas Jr., but it may be more of a, hey, when someone comes and offers you for him, make sure you're getting top dollar. Here's just kind of to give you an idea of kind of where Brian Thomas Jr. has been at this year. He's got a 21% target share on the year, which is good, not like out of control like Malik Neighbors is over 30. So he's got a 21% target share. He's wide receiver 8-ish points per game. Last 2 weeks, he's had 9 targets each game. And I think the knock on him coming into the season was Brian Thomas is like a wind sprint guy. He's going to be like maybe a form of George Pickens, sort of kind of like he's just going to run deep balls and he doesn't have a full route tree. No, Brian Thomas does have a full route tree and he's showing that. And week 5, he had a touchdown that he just blazed everybody. He went 22 miles per hour. It gave me like shades of Jamar Chase. I think that that's the type of style that he can sort of bring of just an explosion every now and then because he has that in him. Like 22 miles per hour is the fastest speed anybody's ran this year in the NFL. And I think some of the comps coming to the year where he's kind of like, oh, he's kind of like T. Higgins, kind of like George Pickens. Well, he's kind of like a blend of T. Higgins and Jamar Chase to me. And I think that he's got to be moved up into like the wide receiver, like 8 to 10 range at this point. Like if you think about Jefferson, Chase, Lamb, Nico, ARSB, Neighbors, like that kind of like being like the top 6. After that, you could make the case to me to put Brian Thomas Jr. right there alongside like Marvin Harrison Jr., Puka, and probably forget London. And then my final thing, I got offered Puka for Brian Thomas Jr. and a throw in of Pop Douglas. I'm not adding anything to Brian Thomas Jr. to get Puka. They to me are even. I just declined and said, like, I don't really want to move Brian Thomas Jr. for Puka straight up. And I'm very pro Puka. You've got him in like over 25% of my leagues. So I'm very pro Puka, but this just kind of shows like how high I am on Brian Thomas Jr. I think that he can continue to surge. And in a few weeks, we might be talking about him in that top 6 group that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, that's right to me. One of the actionable things that if I had any Marvin Harrison Jr. shares, which I don't, I think he still has enough value from preseason plus what he's doing right now. I would definitely look to trade Marvin Harrison for Brian Thomas Jr. and see if I could get a plus, even a small one, a 3-2 swap. That might be gone now. I think I'd still rather just have Brian Thomas Jr. straight up than Marvin Harrison. But I think that's outside of the top elite tier that you had mentioned, Todd. I think Brian Thomas belongs with anyone else, like Puka, Garrett Wilson, AJ Brown, etc.
It's funny to me because a couple weeks ago we briefly touched on like, oh, what would like we didn't go deep into it, but like just kind of touch the surface of like what would a rookie redraft look like, and like the obvious mover being Malik Neighbors, right? And like that was kind of Caleb was still in his full struggle mode when we were talking about that. I think it's funny that as much as Neighbors is skyrocketed in like the rookie redraft, I think Brian Thomas's perception is definitely exploded potentially more than his, not above him, but in terms of growth in value.
Yeah.
I think he's an interesting guy that like Todd kind of mentioned. The concerns were like, is this guy just like a run straight guy, and maybe he'll get some like Deshaun Jackson type plays or whatever the case is, and he's proving to be more of like a Julio Jones, AJ Green esque style of player, where he has the physical tools, but he also is doing those other things. So to me, it's wheels up, and I've tried various things for him, like undercutting things, and it certainly got me mostly laughed out of the building. So I think you got to come correct at this point for sure for Brian Thomas Jr.
Yeah, Matt, you mentioned Marvin Harrison Jr. I've got a couple Marvin Harrison Jr., maybe 3 out of 15 leagues. And I've contemplated trying to make that swap, but I think it's probably like close to 1-to-1 is what it would take to trade for him. I might go try to do like Marvin Harrison Jr. for Brian Thomas Jr. in a second. I think I might get kind of laughed at, but that's something that I might just give it a shot.
You know what an interesting one to me is, like, what is the difference between him and like AJ Brown? So that's one person that wasn't really mentioned. He's coming off an injury. The offense is kind of maybe flailing a little bit. He might be the shine or luster might be wearing off of AJ Brown a little bit. He's getting towards that age value regression. I'd be curious, like, and it's also kind of funny to think about again, like if we're having this conversation 6 weeks ago, I'm screaming at myself for being a lunatic. And now I'm like, man, what is that difference? I have a lot of AJ Brown. I diversified more than I would have liked for Brian Thomas in case he was what Todd mentioned, like just a run straight guy that doesn't turn into anything. I've been hurt before many times. So it's an interesting, like, is it AJ Brown in a second? Does that get it done on a win now team? Probably not, right?
AJ Brown in a second.
That's probably what it should cost. It did come down to whether the person that has Brian Thomas Jr. is just kind of unwilling to move him, because like that's how I am right now. Like I just don't have any interest in moving him, because I think I can very clearly see the steps here. And the next step is, 9 targets back-to-back weeks. Like he goes for 9 again. Like that's just going to keep 80 yards and a touch. Like he has the touchdown ability in the red zone because of his size. And then he has the touchdown ability just to go 60 like he did the other day because of his speed. So that's how Christian Watson, kind of how he was getting touchdowns there a few years ago. And obviously that kind of flailed out. Fortunately for Matt, they had reinforcements at the wide receiver position. But like how Jamar Chase does, like Jamar Chase gets him a little bit in the red zone, but then also get them just, splash plays. And I think that he can do that. And so to be a top 4 or 5 receiver, not only do you have to get the yards, not only do you have to get the targets and the catches, but you really do need the touchdowns. And there's some guys at the wide receiver position that they maybe want to get the yards and the receptions, but the touchdowns haven't really come, which we kind of say touchdowns are fluky, whatever. But Justin Jefferson, they're not fluky for him.
Yeah, that's true. So the Christian Watson mention of the Packers receivers kind of is a nice segue into my next Polar Bear.
You're welcome.
I think that some of the Packers skill players are starting to be overvalued a little bit. Specifically, Jaden Reed, Tucker Kraft, and Dontavian Wicks, I see the most with. But like Jaden Reed, I see people putting him like above Drake London, which seems kind of nuts to me. Tucker Kraft is kind of unique in that all the tight ends suck. So sure, like he looks as good as almost anyone who's not Bowers or McBride. I've seen people trade Kincaid straight up for Kraft, which I don't mind. I think that's fine. So I think if people are putting Kraft at tight end 4 or 5 in Dynasty, I don't hate it because of the lack of other options, but as long as you're devaluing the entire position, I don't hate it. Like it is so. Like
kind of like what I was
Jacob,
talking about at quarterback the last week. I was talking about how like I'm okay with if you want to have Mahomes at like QB 3 or 4, but like you got to be devaluing the position as a whole for me. You're kind of saying the similar thing of like, you know, if you have Tucker Kraft at tight end 4, that's, you know, whatever. But let's devalue the whole group.
An important distinction to say like tight end 4 does not equal wide receiver 4 does not equal running back 4 or quarterback 4, right? Like I think that's what like sometimes people are like it's a 1-to-1. Like, oh, I'll give you the 4th best quarterback for the 4th best wide receiver, or whatever the case
or
is.
They'll say like, or they'll be like, oh, you know, this analyst who I respect a lot has Kraft at tight end 4. I'm going to go trade a mid first for him. Like, I would not recommend doing that. Just go get Kittle for a lot cheaper or something like that. But and it's funny, I feel like
keep saying that like every
for a few more years, it'll always be like Kittle.
It's always the answer.
But real quickly, so the bottom line here for why I'm starting to think this, I think Jaden Reed and Wicks have a lot of talent. I think Kraft has a lot of talent. I don't think people understand how Green Bay wants to function as an offense. We see Dobbs back at practice already this week after he did his little AWOL thing last week. We see Christian Watson back at practice after his ankle injury. They're going to spread the ball around. They're going to keep doing this. Jaden Reed is not going to get 140 targets this year, or probably ever in his career with Green Bay.
He has an 18.6% target share, which, to be fair, he does get a lot of rushing work. So you kind of have to think about him in like the Debo sense. But an 18% target share, that's tough to be putting up like wide receiver 1 numbers on and on and on, which he keeps doing. But it's difficult.
Yeah, and I just think they're going to continue to spread the ball around when they have their full complement of players. I do expect Reed to be the best scoring of that group.
Yeah.
I have no problem paying like a mid first for Jaden Reed right now, but I'm still taking some of those other guys like definitely over him. Like if you start talking about like he's worth more than Garrett Wilson or Drake London or Rashee Rice, I'm just completely out on that. I'll sell for any of those guys.
So on the same topic, right? I think we all kind of, or at least I think we're on the same page that like Jaden Reed, I'll just speak for myself. I thought he was like overrated coming into the season. Like maybe he was kind of like it was good, not gadget player, but like, cause I think that's like kind of like a negative connotation, but like he would have to be uber hyper efficient to your point. I guess my point is, for me, he has exceeded my expectations of what I expected of him this year. But at the same time, I think what you're saying is right, and I agree with that. It's gone the other way now. That it's like he's being valued too highly to like someone like, you know, like you're saying Drake London or somebody like that that's getting, you know, 15 targets in a high pass volume offense. It's forcing Jaden Reed to have to score a touchdown and have another long play every game.
Yeah,
for
basically
him to, like,
he has to do something
pace.
insane. Yeah, he's got to do something insane every week, which he seems to do. He had the bomb play this past week, but then there'll be like there will come a time when those are going to be a little bit more difficult to just continue over and over and over.
Yeah, there's going to be a game in the near future where Jaden Reed has 2 catches for 15 yards and the Packers win, and it's going to be Romeo Dobbs or it's going to be Wicks or it's going to be Kraft or it's going to be someone else. Like, I think that's where Drake London, I don't want to speak this into existence now. I don't see that happening where if they have the same type of game plan, that's not ever going to happen to him. And kind of like the appeal of what ARSB was for, you know, when he really emerged as that top tier guy that you knew that floor was also going to be there, but he's also capable of all those big plays.
To put into context the target situation, Garrett Wilson had 22 targets this past week. Jaden Reed has 22 targets this season. Now, obviously, they had Malik Willis for a couple weeks, so kind of throw him a bone there. But that's drastic when we're talking about targets and opportunities.
Yeah, and I mean, I have no argument with Reed's talent. I mean, like Brian said, every week it seems like he's making an explosive play for 50 yards. But he has to keep doing that, and generally that's not very sustainable. So yeah, I just from some of the trades I've been seeing and some of the values I've been seeing people throw around with them, it just seems like getting a little ahead of our skis. And I also think there's just kind of a fundamental misunderstanding of how Green Bay wants to operate. It's like everybody's was like, oh, why aren't they in on Brandon Ayuk? Why aren't they in on this receiver? They need like a true number one. It's like every time Matt LaFleur talks about this in the media, he sounds disgusted at the idea of a number one receiver. Unpredictability is built into their offensive scheme. I think they want to keep it that way. So if I can cash out on Reed and just make a lateral trade and get like Drake London or something, I'm doing that every time.
Yeah. So just to give you an idea of a couple of trades that have happened in the last day, today's the 9th. There's Jaden Reed and Darnell Mooney for Rashid Shaheed and Puka. So Mooney and Shaheed probably even. So you're talking about a Reed for Puka straight up. I think we are all taking Puka there. There's Reed and Kyle Pitts for Malik Neighbors. Taking Neighbors there. Ooh. Yeah. Reed, here's an interesting one. Reed
That's
for
crazy.
Yeah, Reed. I mean, to us, Kyle Pitts is just like a big nothing burger. All right, so Reed for Olave and a third. What do y'all think about that one?
That one makes sense to me. I think to me it would be a preference because Olave has plenty of his I'll say wear and tear on his resume. I think he was built up as like this efficient, should have had expected fantasy points, or his expected fantasy points were a lot higher than what his fantasy points showed. And to me, I'm definitely concerned with him. So I kind of like the Jaden Reed one there, I think.
Yeah. So I'm with you. I feel like Olave would be like a whole separate segment for discussion. Yeah. But I mean, we're really starting to close in on the why is Olave worth a lot more than Rashid Shaheed type discussion. I mean, this goes back to last year. So, yeah. I mean, their values are definitely going in opposite direction. Olave does scare me a little bit.
Jaden Reed, we haven't seen this guy in a while, but Devontae Smith has been hurt on bye. So, Jaden Reed or Devontae Smith?
So for me, I'll first of all, I'll take Devontae Smith over Olave. So that would to me speaks to it's closer. I think it would. Man, I'll take Devontae Smith. I think he's more of what I talked about before, like the floor safer net with the also explosiveness. That's why I would lean his way.
Matt,
yeah, it's a good one, I think, because I would have Reed and Devontae Smith. About even. But to my point, I don't really see people taking Devontae Smith in the same discussions that Reed has been a part of over the past
week. Not totally shifting here, Todd. Let's put you on the spot here. We talked about this kind of jokingly, but also serious in the group chat a little bit. But Rashid Shaheed or Xavier Worthy?
Definitely taking Xavier Worthy. I just don't. I mean,
it's starting to get weird.
Ceiling for Shaheed, I just don't see as being like that crazy. I mean, Worthy's ceiling gets lower every day, but I do think we have to kind of give a little bit of time for Xavier Worthy. Let's he's in game 5. He just finished game 5. I mean, he's not being very good. So I'm not like beating the drum for him or anything, but his speed is incredible. Like his speed is off the charts. I don't really understand why the Chiefs aren't getting him involved. Maybe it's because he sucks. And so that's concerning because the Chiefs aren't dumb. Mahomes isn't dumb. But it seems when he gets the ball, he just starts flying down the field. And majority of the time, he scores a touchdown. So I don't really understand. Yeah, I don't really understand what's going on there. I only have one Xavier Worthy. I have kind of would like to not have any Xavier Worthy, but his value is so depressed right now. Like, I don't even think anybody would give you a first for him. And I just think that with Rice out, there is opportunity there. He may not take advantage of it, but if he does, it could be massive.
So if you're a Rashid Shaheed owner, okay, whether you have him or not, let's pretend you do in this situation. What are you trading on top of Shaheed to get Xavier Worthy? Even though you're kind of wishy-washy on whether Worthy is or isn't a good football player outside of his athleticism.
First off, I think going to the Xavier Worthy owner with anything like I'm gonna say a second, and I think that the Xavier Worthy is probably gonna kind of laugh at me because they made that investment. They're kind of like sunk cost fallacy. They're just not gonna just turn around and throw him for Rashid Shaheed, who is worth borderline nothing in the offseason, and a second round pick. But yeah, so Shaheed in a second is probably what I'd offer for Worthy.
But we're also talking about like Xavier Worthy went like 109, 110 in most rookie drafts from what I saw. You're probably talking about a contending team. We're talking about teams desperate for winning. Shaheed's producing better than Xavier Worthy. He's still young. There's been Chris Olave. I guess to me, and I'm not saying you should or shouldn't be, but I think this is a potentially actionable, interesting thing if someone does believe in Xavier Worthy more than myself, for example. I think that's something that you aren't getting laughed out of the building, to your point that you would have gotten laughed out of the building a month ago.
I have some. That's also like Rashid Shaheed has looked good. He had 5 targets last week. For the week before that,
no, he had more than that. He had unless I'm looking at this wrong, he had 9 targets against Kansas City this past week, 11 targets.
Sorry, you're right. I'm looking at his game log upside down.
Yeah.
No, I was looking at his game log upside down. He had 9 targets, 11, and then the week before that he had no catches. So he's been good, like 4 for 86, 883. Like he's been good. It's not like he's been crazy good though. It's not like if I enter him into my lineup, my contender goes to the next level. So I don't know. I mean, Darnell Mooney's been really no different. Like Darnell Mooney, Darnell Mooney to me, I might rather have Darnell Mooney than Rashid Shaheed.
That's a different story for another day. I think like they're similar in my opinion, but
yeah, I'm trying to.
I got to personally witness that Bucks Falcons game last Thursday, and Darnell Mooney, man, but he was cooking.
He cooked, man. He cooked, yeah.
He also had a horrible drop at the end of the game. He could have been more.
Brian and I each acquired a Mooney today. He acquired one from me for a late second, which I think is a good value for him. And I traded
2 and 3 and another one too. Okay, so that's why you did that. So you were like, "Hey, I'll trade 1 away and I'll trade 4-1." That's the classic Matt. I love that.
Yeah, pretty much. And also, I don't know. Polk's probably going to be pretty good. I don't know that he's ever going to be great. I just would prefer Mooney's points right now for that specific roster. But Shaheed, I'm trying not to be I'm trying not to be stubborn with Shaheed because, like, going into the season, I just had a firm idea of what this player was in my mind, and that was like, like a shittier Gabe Davis or like about equal to Buffalo Gabe Davis, where he's just gonna break a 50-yard touchdown every other game, but when he's not going to be worth a whole lot. But then the last couple of weeks, 20 targets in 2 weeks. I mean, that's really something. That's like a real number. And he's going back to last year. He's got like almost an equal target share to Chris Olave. I don't want to buy Shaheed right now because I feel like I don't know, because I keep like arguing with myself basically like, oh, this is a little fluky, etc. But he seems worth the price that people have been buying him for. Like
I think like the better bet is like what I think you're hinting at is that he's going to have another down game, and that's when you already missed one window. It's not a great time to buy off of 20 targets and 2 good games in a row, right? Yeah. Like I think that's what you're kind of getting at. And I think it's similar. I thought it was going to be similar with Darnell Mooney, but maybe it's like that he has like Darnell Mooney has like the previous hype that like the stank on him still a little bit, that people are like, oh, people told me he was Tyreek Hill 2.0 or wherever the fuck Bears fans were saying, those lunatics. Like whatever they were saying, I think they kind of like Dynasty perspective, he has a little extra stank. That's all I'll say. That like I think people want to get rid of him. They think it's selling high, and it might be, but to me, like I would pay 2-2s, like 2 late 2s for Mooney.
That's what I think he's worth. I think he's worth 2 late 2s. Somebody actually asked me that today, and I said 2 late 2s.
Yeah, and I mean, I got 1 for 2 and 1 for 2 and a 3, and Matt got 1 for Jalen Polk that might be a 2. He might be a nothing in a year. So I mean, I think that makes sense.
There is something to that where once a player has multiple years of like not producing much at all, it really takes like almost a half season for the community at large to kind of catch up. And I mean, I'm the same way. It's not. I'm still hesitant on Shaheed.
I'm going to probably send more 2 offers for single 2s for Mooney and probably for Shaheed too. Honestly, I had like next to nothing Mooney wise, so I have 2 now. I think I probably have 3 now. I had 2, 1 before today, so I'm hoping to get that exposure up a little bit. And I had a decent amount of Shaheed, but I think he's legit. I don't think he's a superstar. I don't think he'll ever be like a top 12 guy. But that's not what you're paying for. Like if I was paying a 1 and a 2 for Shaheed, like that puts a lot of pressure that he has to be what people thought and think and maybe is Olave is. To me, it's like the opportunity cost is pretty nice right now. We're talking buys and sells, and I think we can kind of transition. We've spent about 30 minutes talking about a couple players that maybe people aren't interested in, but we certainly are. So Garrett Wilson, I know, really moves the needle a lot. So let's talk a little about this. He had about 48 targets this past game. I'm sure that's sustainable. I'm sure Rodgers is only going to give him more targets once Devontae Adams, he brings his buddy in. So let's talk Garrett Wilson. Todd, what is his value and has it changed for you after that game?
I think so. What is his value? I think his value is still 2 firsts. I've tried a first and 2 seconds a couple times, been rejected. I think that it's still 2 firsts. I traded away Garrett Wilson prior to the 48 target game for Puka straight up. And now I have no Garrett Wilson. And I feel like I'm not like a hater of Garrett Wilson, but yet I find myself with none. So I think it's still 2 firsts, especially after the 22 target game. And yeah, I think he's just not really obtainable unless you're tiering down. So you're going to have to be moving down from probably that top tier. So like Lamb, Chase, ARSB, maybe like a Nico now that he's hurt. I think you're going to have to tier down from there most likely. The people that I've seen that have him aren't really interested in like moving off of him for like a T Higgins. Like I think you'd have to move like T in a first to obtain Garrett Wilson.
Matt, before you give your take, I teased a trade that Bryce made for Nico Collins. I have it up now, and it's coincidentally Garrett Wilson was also involved. So Bryce received Nico Collins at 25-2, 25-4, whatever. Gave Jalen Tolbert, Garrett Wilson, and then a late 25-1.
Say it again, but take out the 4.
Yeah, Nico Collins in a 2, Garrett Wilson in a 1.
And Tolbert's not nothing. Somebody said that to me the other day. But, no. I just want to. That's kind of why I asked you to say it again, because Tolbert's not nothing. We talk about Shaheed. We talk about Mooney. Brandon Cooks is now hurt. Tolbert had a lot of targets the other day. I don't want to derail a Garrett Wilson discussion to talk about Jalen Tolbert's dumbass, but he's not nothing.
Yeah,
he might be worth a late 2. So for this instance,
Nico in a 2, Garrett Wilson a late 1, and then Tolbert you said is a late 2. So late 1, late 2, Garrett Wilson, Nico in a 2.
I think I would take the Garrett Wilson side on that.
Yeah, I would too. I think I would, because I'm just going to say the Tolbert and the second kind of negate each other. Now we're talking about Garrett Wilson in a 1 for Nico. And I know that things have not looked good for Garrett Wilson. I'm just like kind of taking the injury out of it, just called Nico like wide receiver 5. I got to take the first there. If you had said I think a first is the gap, and I'm good with taking that and moving back.
I think I agree, but additional context as that type of stuff matters. Bryce is tanking, so that's like kind of what we talked about earlier. He's maybe a bigger Nico fan than we are, but I think, like you're saying, like that's the price to play. I wish, like you're saying, like I wish the Jalen Tolbert part wasn't there, because I think that's probably the gap. And Jalen Tolbert
That's the
might,
one that like almost makes it uncomfortable, because what Jalen Tolbert is, I don't think you can view him as like a value, but he can be a Mooney, he can be a Shaheed, where bye weeks, bam, throw Tolbert in there, no problem. Injury, all right. Nico's hurt. Now I can just throw Tolbert out there. And he's not gonna kill for you, but it's like, all right, I'm playing him at least instead of Bo Melton, who I played this past week in a couple leagues.
I played a lot of Bo Melton.
And I mean, again, not to spend too much time on Tolbert, but like, he really is.
Kill that part.
He really is in the most perfect situation possible for him to gain value the rest of the season, where he's running all the routes. He's the number 2 receiver on Dallas, a very pass-centric offense. Dak is a great quarterback, and their defense is fucking terrible. So they're going to be in some shootouts, etc., stuff like that. So, yeah, but I think that's a fair value trade. Like, so Garrett Wilson in a late one for Nico, I think is about even. Which, yeah, I mean that,
and a 2, Nico and a 2.
I thought the 2 and Tolbert cancel each other out, right? So
okay, gotcha. Okay, gotcha. Sorry.
So it's, which we might be generous in Tolbert's value there, but
well, for ease of discussion.
Yeah, for ease of discussion, but
he also could easily be in nothing when we look back on this in a year too, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I think that's also very, very well within the range of outcomes.
So let me ask you guys about another receiver real quick, for if you're going to tear down from Garrett Wilson, if you're going to sell off Garrett Wilson, what do you need on top of Josh Downs? So someone offers you Josh Downs. Someone offers you Josh Downs.
What's it worth again? No, I'm coming around on Josh Downs. He's fine. That's fine. Let's keep the discussion flowing.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah, Matt. So you're saying, what's the difference between Garrett Wilson and Josh Downs, right?
If you're gonna tier, well, the reason I picked out Josh Downs is because to me that strikes me as two players with value going the opposite way. Like, we got a speed bump on Garrett Wilson losing value. Now he's like, he had the nice game that his value stopped dropping, at least, and it's probably just the same value it was a week ago. I would say I wouldn't say it's more. Josh Downs his value is rising by the week. I mean, people are already talking about he's the Colts wide receiver 1. There was an interesting tweet the other day that if you look at his like target share and his yards per route run and his first downs per route run, Josh Downs compares very favorably to Malik Neighbors in all those categories, which is insane. But he's been a huge part of the Colts offense the last couple of weeks. The elephant in the room is Anthony Richardson is coming back soon, and Flacco tends to inflate the production of all his receivers. But if we're playing Dynasty, if Richardson sucks, he's not going to be around that much longer than this season, maybe next season. But unless he improves, I just think that's an interesting type of trade that I always look at, where, all right, what guy is gaining in value? What guy is stagnating or losing in value? If there's more than a first in difference between them, now is a good time to make that swap if I get a mid first and something else.
I think there's definitely
that's where I was coming from.
A first in between them, yeah. And correct me if you disagree, Todd. I think there's definitely, I was going to say a first and a second in between them. Because like if we're talking 2 1s for Garrett Wilson, we're probably thinking Josh Downs. I was thinking like 2 2s probably, like as a best case scenario. I can't see someone paying a 1 for him right now. That's kind of where I see. And so like I assume this is going to trigger Matt maybe sending some offers out. maybe during the podcast, maybe after the podcast, that I'll see something go down tonight. I think you can, like maybe even like just like a mid one, maybe if someone's pretty high on Josh Downs. But I think even if the highest of Josh Downs fans are selling him for Garrett Wilson after this past week,
oh, of course,
yeah.
like obviously if it's straight up, but
No.
So
I
like
think
no,
he wasn't
like
saying
plus
straight up.
and a one, and I'm saying
Yeah,
and a
yeah.
one.
Josh Downs and a mid one would get my attention if I have Garrett Wilson and someone offered me Downs in a mid one. If I got offered a mid 1 and 2 and Downs for Garrett Wilson, that's a snap accept on my part.
So I have one Josh Downs. Brian's actually in the league. I threw him on the trade block. I didn't get any offers. But somebody did reach out and they asked what I valued him at. And Brian, you said what I told him. I said I value him at about 2 2s or a very early 2.
He must not listen to the pod.
I don't know. But and he didn't make an offer. So I think that I scared him off with whatever it is that I said. So maybe I'm a high on Josh Downs. Michael Pittman, we led off the show talking about
known
Michael
Josh
Pittman's,
Downs fan. Yeah.
How Michael Pittman is going to be out. Yeah, but you said it. Anthony Richardson is a just disgrace for his wide receivers. And at some point, he's going to come back and just continue to, throttle them down to the floor. So you mentioned it, Matt. You mentioned comparing. Somebody listened to that earlier, and they said Josh Downs comparing his like peripherals to Malik Neighbors, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, Matt's an idiot." No, they actually are. Josh Downs has a 31% target share this year, and like his peripherals are very they're very good. Like
they're insane.
Awesome. Yeah, very good.
Let me give a hypothetical. Let's say Josh Downs has double-digit targets, close to or like around 100 yards. Who cares? Touchdown, yes or no? Like, I think we all agree, like, touchdown would probably be more buzzy. But what is his value if we're having this discussion next week with Michael Pittman being out this upcoming week?
I mean, yeah, if he goes like 8 catches for 100 yards on 10 targets, I think we're starting to talk about, is he worth a late one? At that point, all his peripherals are going to shine. So the nerds are eventually going to start taking notice of that shit. And, their influence is strongly felt throughout a lot of the community. The film guys love him. Downs is a baller when you watch him, I think, anyway. And I think at that point, what I've been doing with Downs the last week or two after he has my attention, I was kind of waiting for Richardson to come back and then, let Downs have his 2 catches on 4 target game with Anthony Richardson and then go make some offers for Downs. But he's just a player that has my attention with some of his peripheral numbers are just nuts. So
I think so the biggest concern I think everybody has is that his quarterback long-term is not Joe Flacco. But what these last 2 weeks I think have proven this Colts offense, okay, we have to use Josh Downs. He is probably the biggest focal point outside of Jonathan Taylor to our offense. He should be the primary target of the pass game, even ahead of Michael Pittman. So when Anthony Richardson returns, I think that while it may not be as great to look at, that they will at least attempt to maintain that and continue to keep him as part of the offense. Maybe Taylor or reel Anthony Richardson back and say, okay, let's throw these 8-yard out routes and in routes to Josh Downs because we're pretty successful at it with Joe Flacco. Let's see if Richardson can do it. Now, I don't know if he can, but I think they'll at least attempt to do it. Yeah,
he can't.
He can't.
He can't do the out routes right now. That's that's where he throws it into like a different stratosphere.
Tank Dell or Josh Downs?
Yeah.
Well, I think I would take Josh Downs now.
It's tough because Tank Dell is about to have 4 weeks without Nico. And
that's true. Yeah, that's true.
And
that can be a positive or a negative.
Yeah. So I was saying this earlier to someone. This Sunday, Tank Dell could just die. He could just go 2 catches at 20 yards, and we're like, oh yeah, Tank Dell sucks. I wouldn't even get a second for him. That. Well,
yeah. A very real scenario this Sunday is Xavier Hutchinson or whatever the fucking guy's name is out targets Tank Dell, and
I was
then
gonna
people
say-
start really freaking out.
I was gonna say, like, imagine surviving a gunshot wound and then dying based off an alpha Xavier Hutchinson week. Like that's fucking Shakespearean right there.
No, but at the same time, Tank Dell could go, 8 for 80 and a touchdown, and then like, oh, he's awesome again.
Yeah, he's
and
back.
now we're just waiting for Diggs to leave next year, and then it'll be the Tank and Nico show, which I think is kind of what we had hoped, what we had thought like 2 or 3 weeks ago. But now, as things have progressed, I'm very concerned about Tank Dell. I think he's probably also worth about 2.2s. I think he and Josh Downs are similar. Who would I rather have? I think the fact that Tank Dell is tied to Stroud, I would still prefer Tank Dell. But we are one game away from a good Josh Downs week, bad Tank Dell, and I'm like, no, flip.
Well, and the other thing that kind of caught my attention was Matt Harmon recently said that he believes Tank Dell's broken leg from last year is really affecting him still this season in the same way that Tony Pollard's did last year, that Mark Andrews had that tightrope surgery this offseason on his ankle.
Jalen Waddle have that in college?
He might have, but yeah, if there's an injury affecting Tank Dell, that's not an opportunity thing. And, the film guys are saying he looks like a different player so far this year than he did last year. That leads me to believe it will get better at some point. If it's not in the next month, though, that could create a real big buy window for Tank Dell because his value will drop a lot if he doesn't produce Nico out.
Yeah, I think it's this week is 100% where we find out what's going on in terms of his value for the rest of the season, unless he has an unforeseen, unpredictable couple weeks of great play. I think if this week, if he gets, like you're saying, like not just Diggs, but if he's the third or fourth fiddle in a potentially also mix-and-list offense, again, speaking of injuries, I think that is going to be, he's droppable in redraft leagues and like that type of deal. We're not talking redraft, but like just speaking like short-term value, I think that's where his perspective is going to be.
So speaking of Tank Dell, I do have one trade that I made on him. So I traded away Tank Dell and Drake London for CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, I mean that's a great trade, I think, because you get CeeDee Lamb.
Okay. I've heard the opposite. I've heard some people be like, "Oh, easily Lamb," but I've heard a couple people be like, I might take London there.
I'm making a W right now. I wish it could be bigger. Like with my hands. If I had bigger hands, that's the trade you just made.
London is the guy that I'm just not trying to sell generally right now. But if I get CeeDee Lamb back,
either.
Yeah, but if I get CeeDee Lamb back, so whenever I hear like Drake London, it kind of mentally prepares me to like, okay, I'm probably going to take that side. And I was like, no, I'll take the CeeDee Lamb side.
So I don't really have much to say about Puka. We talked about Garrett Wilson versus Puka. I made a even swap 1-for-1 with them. I don't know that I have much to say about Puka besides this. I think the people that have Puka, if they're contending, they're probably going through a lot of under injuries. They're going through bye weeks. Maybe you tried to get Puka earlier in the year, like week 2 or 3, and they were like, I'm good. I'm fine. I don't want to move him. I think it'd be a good idea to go back and try again. I think that his value also, like if there's someone that uses like a fantasy calc or a KTC or something, it has obviously dropped in the last few weeks. So like maybe it's possible to go out and get him. I don't really have anything other to say like he's been injured. It's not like there's been any new news, but let's not forget that he's awesome. And he put up one of the greatest rookie seasons, maybe the greatest rookie season ever. So like, let's just not forget that. And he's going to come back week 8, 9, and 10. And I expect him to be awesome again.
I completely agree with that. One annoying thing that I found, and it's just like a pure coincidence, like half my leagues, Puka's on a tanker. That was like began the season as a tanker, and I was so fucking annoyed by that.
I have him on. I have him in 4 out of 15. 3 of them are tankers.
Yeah, you were one of them.
maybe I'm the problem.
Yeah, that was like that's when like a very high value asset goes on IR, and you're like, oh, where can I try and scoop up the discount, and then he's on the tanker in most of your teams. Always an annoying moment.
So like real quick, I know you don't want to spend too much time on, we've already spent a lot of time on Garrett Wilson. We don't want to spend a lot of time on Puka right now because he's not like directly impacting, wins and losses necessarily, but I would love to have a make-believe scenario real quickly, like just if you could flip Puka and Garrett Wilson situations. Like right now, I think all three of us probably take Puka over Garrett Wilson as their current situations, assuming health and everything else. Like next year, let's say Puka versus Garrett Wilson, with either Rodgers or who knows who his quarterback is at the Jets. I don't know if he'll just be on an ayahuasca, retreat or whatever, but I'm taking Garrett Wilson if he's on the Rams over Puka on the Jets.
Yeah, no question in my mind.
Do we? Okay. Is there a question? I want to hear if there's a question.
I'll give a little bit of a counter argument. And so one of the only question mark that I actually have for Puka is his situation. It is great right now for a contender, but does that thing change once Stafford's gone? Like we know Stafford is, first off, he's awesome. He's awesome for a receiver. Does that thing like change somehow for him? Like, I don't know that their situations are that different except for in the short term, I guess is probably what I'm saying.
But longer term, we're also like assuming McVay is going to be there, right? Like that's part of the assumption.
Yeah. So basically it's McVay versus, but like the Jets could get like Ben Johnson next year. Like, who knows who they're going to get next year. Now, if they get some idiot defensive coordinator that wants to come in and, run the damn ball, then yeah, that might be a problem. So yeah, I prefer the Rams situation. Don't get me wrong, but I don't know that it's like as special long term as maybe people want it to be. I guess is the way I'm thinking about it. Like Stafford's going to be there for a finite amount of time.
I think that, yeah, I think Stafford probably has a couple more years, but I do think the McVay factor is the biggest part to me. Like I just know he's an awesome coach. Maybe the Jets hire an awesome coach also, but I think it's much more likely the Jets will fuck up their next coaching hire.
Probably.
That's what they do. I mean, this was supposed to be the year that they had no excuses and everything looked right, and they're a fucking clown show. So I don't think that's going to change in the next few years. I think they're always going to be kind of a shit show.
I'm curious the times that like when you get rid of you fire a defensive-minded head coach, what odds are of you going offensive the next time. So there's a lot of options out there for them. We don't need to belabor it, but there is Ben Johnson, there's Bobby Slowick, there's Kubiak from the Saints. So like there's some decent options that I think we would all be fairly excited about. But yeah, anyways, the Rams is a better situation. I'd prefer Garrett Wilson, but I don't know that it's like a huge needle mover. And I love Puka.
I guess my overarching idea with this thought is that it's an interesting exercise to like think about if those things were reversed, because as we know, coaches can change, quarterbacks can change like at the drop of a hat. It's interesting if you were just like, if all things are created equal or if they were in reverse situations. I think it's an exercise that is beneficial and helpful in trade evaluation and buy low, sell high, or whatever the case is. So it's just something that I like playing that game. I don't know if anyone else does, but
do we view Nico Collins, like, do we even like relatively even know like that Nico Collins is capable of this if CJ Stroud isn't drafted? What if Bryce Young went pick 2? Is Nico Collins even a thing? Like, he was decent, I guess, with Davis Mills, but like he wasn't obviously this. So yeah, I think it's a good point that like these situations do change, and so like go for the talent, and then but like the situation does drastically matter.
Yeah, Bryce Young is so bad. I do believe he would kill Nico, and Nico would not be that valuable with him. But like he's like a special level of bad, like that. Zach Wilson and like Deshaun Watson. Yeah, there's just not that many QBs that are that fucking bad where they'll completely kill every weapon associated with them. And So I do think Nico would have had a rough go of it with Bryce Young probably. But
so
all right,
I think one question that people are asking right now is like, I'm a contender. I've got Brees. I've got Bijan. First off, they're not doing anything for me. What do I do? I think you just got to, strap up and, hope things get better. But what is their market value at this point? We talked earlier about how like you just kind of like drop all the quarterbacks down, or maybe like drop tight end 4 and down, like move the whole group down. Are we just moving the whole running back? Like, if they're like, do we just move the whole group? Like, what are we valuing Brees, Bijan, Gibbs? Like, what are we valuing those guys at this point in terms of like draft capital?
So really quickly, I think the primary positive for both of them is that their involvement in the passing game is like kept them afloat to like duds, but they are duds for what they were previously valued as, right? So like to me, the price you're paying for that type of running back initially, like in the preseason, early in this season, is you got to give me Christian McCaffrey type production.
I have to have at least top 5 running back. Like if I'm going
to
pay
have
that
top 5 running back, you have to have like any day he could go off for 40. Like neither of those things are happening right now. They're fighting to get to 12 to 14, 15 points a game, which is fine, but like you gave up something significant or you were really bad for a team to have those guys on your team, like in rookie drafts. So I think that they're definitely not meeting expectations. Value wise, I think you're starting to talk about like less than 2-1s probably at this point. Like I think that's where that's where I'm at. Like I would want like a pretty solid good 1, 2 in like maybe like a young guy that like again like a Rashid Shaheed or some like pick your 2-2s guy, Darnell Mooney, something like that. I think that's where I'm at, and that's gonna sound kind of panicky, but the reason I feel this way is partly that I think the talent is still there, but it's the utilization that we're talking about that like I don't know if they're going to recover from their this shitty coaching. My prayers are that especially for Brees with the coaching change, they're going to get him back into a focus. And similar to Josh Downs, I think his value is going to speak a lot to the next couple weeks. And that's not crash or explode in a good way, but I think it's going to say a lot to what their focus in, what they see in him as, I guess.
Yeah, my hesitancy in knocking them too much is people have talked about the splits with Brees last year. Weeks 1 through 5, he was at like, I don't know, 10 points a game. And then weeks like 6 through 17, he was at 18 to 20 points a game or something like that. I could see a similar thing happening here. I kind of agree with you. I would say their value to me has gone from close to 3 1s to down to about 2 1s.
That's where I'm at.
Yeah.
I was kind of thinking
so,
along the same lines. Sorry, go ahead.
So no, sorry, I'm interrupting you, Matt, but like is that like you said last week when you so rudely said that Todd and I were trying to smash people all the time in trades. So your buy price and your sell price, is that the same thing? Is that the case here that you're paying 2 1s for those guys?
I don't think so.
I would still pay 2 1s for them. When I say 2 1s, I'm generally saying like a playoff first. Like I'm not trading like an too early first. Like when I think of like I'm a contender. Maybe I have somebody else's first is also a contender, or maybe it's like my 26th first that I want to be a contender. So 2 playoff ones. Yeah, I'm sending them. I'm not saying it's a buy. I'm not saying like I'm in the championship or anything. Like 2 playoff ones. Yeah, I'm sending that for Brees or Bijan.
Todd, how about this? You're tanking, and it's likely 101.
I would take the 101 over Brees or Bijan.
Yeah, me too, because the running back that you do not want to name, Brian, looks like a fucking phenom over there.
Voldemort.
Not name him. Let's just not talk. Let's not say his name ever, and let's just see how long
it's
we can
Voldemort.
go.
Yeah, it's Voldemort.
Yeah,
well,
I can't trade Voldemort because everybody thinks that Voldemort, like what Bijan was, they think Voldemort will attain that. So I can't trade that. I don't know that Voldemort is better necessarily, but we have to at least acknowledge the way people feel about him.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance he's valued at running back 1 before he ever takes an NFL snap in Dynasty, which I think Bijan was there, so it's not unprecedented. But to kind of go to wrap up that buy or sell discussion, like I do think that Bijan is worth 2 firsts, but the reason I wouldn't necessarily buy that is because, again, my overall philosophy is like I can agree what a player is worth and still not want to buy that player for that value. Like I would just rather. So I'm in the Bijan business for the first time in like over a year. I do have a share of Bijan now. Ever since I traded for him, I've been kind of like regretting it. And I was thinking about just offering it straight up for Drake London. And then I was like, I don't know. That feels a little reactionary, but I'd also kind of rather have Drake London.
I guess it's about right. I was actually gonna. Now that you say it, I was gonna ask right after you got finished. I was gonna ask Bijan or Garrett Wilson, and you said Drake London. But now I'm like in my head, I'm like, well, I think I'd rather have Drake London than Garrett Wilson. So never mind. No, I talked myself out of that one.
Yeah, yeah. I'd have them like back to back, but I think I'd lean London right now too. I'm just very impressed with him and his role in that offense.
Bijan or
I think
Puka?
Bijan or who?
Puka. Let's say you're a contender. You've got Bijan. Shit hit the fan. Your team sucks. You got to just, all right, we got to throw in the towel. Let's play for next year. I mean, Bijan's been so bad. Your team probably does suck. Do you just say, you know what? Let's just swap Bijan for Puka. Let's get the points down. You thought you were a contender. You're trending to like the 105 or 106 right now.
I think I would rather have Puka than Bijan.
I'll say this. I think to not like to the Brees point that you made a couple minutes ago, Matt, like his week 6 through 17 or whatever it was last year. I think both of these running backs, Brees and Bijan, are going to have maybe not an 11-week long explosion, but I think neither of them look like they're like shitty, like or washed or like anything like that. I think the top's going to come off at some point, probably for both of them. And, you know, it's something we talked a couple weeks ago again, like buying a guy at a minorly depressed value right now might open up another sell window if you're really not happy with the product that you bought. I think that's I'm getting close to that as much as I was lesser than you guys were in the Bijan value, but I think that the more I'm thinking about it, those two guys are maybe close to buys if they don't explode in the next week or two.
I would say 2 first. I've really stayed away from trading any of my picks, just kind of like keeping them close to the vest all year. But I might go out and just offer a couple firsts and see if I can get a Bijan. And you kind of just said it, Brian. So I'm basically just repeating what you said. But 1 week of like 120, 2 touchdowns, and then bam, 3 firsts again. And then we're like, all right, well, it's going to take 3 more bad games for it to get back down to 2 firsts.
And if you buy him for 2 1s, I think that is going to happen at some point during the season. Like all of a sudden, if you don't like what you bought, sell it back out. But I mean, I think what I will say, like, because Brees did it last year, I think the people that are really like invested in playing this game and like not being super, super reactionary, Brees gets more leeway than Bijan. Like it seems like people are starting to sour on Bijan more because like he was promised to be the chosen one and he hasn't given chosen one stuff yet. Right? Where Brees sucked kind of for a while last year, but then he exploded and he was like, oh, that's him. And then he's had, little flashy things this year, but like nothing like super substantial yet, outside of like the receiving boosted numbers because Rodgers sucks. But
I'm thinking right now of one league where I know the Bijan is on a team that's in a shitter. I'm going to go offer 2 firsts right now. So maybe we'll get a response. Probably not while we sit here, but I'm making.
And you're a contender.
I'm a contender. Yeah.
Yeah. Two contending firsts is definitely, I think, a pretty good price point to buy.
It's a 25 and a 26. I don't have 225. So a 25.
Yeah.
First
yeah. I think.
Yeah.
Sent.
Boom. Maybe an instant accept on the pod. I just want to say again, Darnell Mooney. We've spoken a little bit about him. I think he's a great buy. That's the guy that I have bought. I'm going to continue to try and buy. I think you can get him for a 2 and a 3. Probably definitely gets it done in a lot of leagues, unless they're like a Bears fan that didn't give up on him, or there's some type of weird, Atlanta fan or something like that. But like, I think he's still under the radar, and I don't think he should be. So that's my buy of the week.
My buy of the week will be kind of what I talked about earlier with Josh Downs. I would say go try to get Josh Downs while he still doesn't have a whole lot of name value, brand value, etc. Like 2 seconds, I think should get the discussion going. I wouldn't pay a late first like you guys said, so anything less than a late first value wise, like an early 2 and a throw in, I don't care about. Sure. So that's who I'd go with, I guess.
Matt, let's say you've got like a Cup or an Adams. I don't know that we need to even distinguish between like tank or not. Like, what would you need on top of one of them to go down to Downs? Cup, Adams,
Nothing.
Diggs. You would just go
nothing.
one for one.
I would just try and trade them for Josh Downs right now.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking in my head, could you move? You might need Cup to be like on his way back, or you may need like a good game from Cup, or you may need like Adams to actually get traded. Diggs is going to go into a week this week without Nico. So like after this week, but like Downs is going to have Flacco again, so like he could improve his value at the same time.
Yeah, it's kind of a touch and go.
Yeah.
Adams, I'm just kind of worried about more so than Cup even. Like, I don't know. Once you start changing teams and you're at his age, it just feels a whole lot like Julio going to the Titans.
DeAndre Hopkins to the Titans. Rainy Moss
to the Titans. Yeah, so once
Devontae
gets traded to Tennessee, it's really going to start looking bad, I think, for him.
He deserves our respect because of his career, obviously, but at the same time, like, this is like Russell Westbrook type territory. In my opinion, we're getting pretty close to that type of shit where it's just like, this thing or that thing, blame this, blame that. Like, I also want to say the right things, but I also don't, because I think I'm this, but I'm actually that. That's how I feel with Devontae Adams at this point. It's pissing me off.
So maybe like I agree with all the sentiment here, but that's
maybe
probably how the people that have him, that's probably how they feel too. Like maybe Adams is somebody that we should go in and just, the problem is that the people that have him, they kind of want to see, all right, like which team is he going to go to? Is it going to be Rodgers? If it's Rodgers, like he's going to be peppered with targets.
I think that's what's boosting him more than anything. Like the looming, like, oh, he's definitely going to end up with his boy. Like that's to me is like the only thing that's really a saving grace for value right now.
Yeah, and by the way, if he does go to the Jets, and the person that has Garrett Wilson gets squeamish because of that I think is a good buy opportunity there, because I don't think that that's going to really impact Garrett Wilson at all. I think he's going to still get like 8, 9, 10 targets a game, and they'll just kind of consolidate between he and Adams. It might take off a little bit of pressure. Obviously, Garrett Wilson struggles against cornerback ones, so maybe he can get alleviated from that a little bit. And I think that would present a little bit of a buy opportunity for Garrett Wilson.
I would totally be on board with that. I think it definitely boosts Garrett Wilson.
Yes,
because in real life, Adams is going to be respected as the, hey, we need to lock this guy up and Rodgers isn't going to just force it to him because they're butt buddies. Like that's not the case. I don't think. Right. I think what
it'll make the whole offense
they'll
better.
say. Yeah. But
You're gonna score
I
more
think Garrett
touchdowns,
Wilson,
more opportunity, more downfield stuff, more efficiency. Maybe he loses a target a game, but the better efficiency will be great.
Yeah.
Matt
I
is
agree.
steaming with all the Rodgers shots I've taken today. He's just so angry. I could tell.
No, I mean, I actually, it sounds weird as a Packer fan, but I really am just ambivalent towards Rodgers. Like, I don't dislike him like a lot of people do, and I don't have any special affinity for him. Like, he's not on my team anymore. So, overall, I don't root against him, but I don't care. Take all the shots that you want. he is a fucking crazy guy.
I will.
So I'm always going to be team buy T Higgins. So like I'm not going to make him my buy because that's just cheating. But I just want to like point out that T Higgins has been really good the last 2 weeks. He had, he had a really good game this past. He had 2 touchdowns. But I have a question for you all because I have a lot of T Higgins and I have some areas where I want to buy Puka. Puka's not my buy of the week either. But I do want to buy Puka. What would you be willing? Let me rephrase it that way. What would you be willing to add to T for Puka?
I think it's got to be like an early second or like an early to mid second.
Yep. Okay. So I have a league where I don't think Brian's in this one. No, he's not in this one. I was thinking of a different league. Brian's not in this league. So I have a league where I offered T and my second, which I'm tanking hard, really hard, should be the 201 and offered it for Puka. They countered with a lot more. And I thought that I was maybe I was out of line. I think I threw in Pop Douglas also. So T 201 and Pop. For
so
Puka.
T and 201 for Puka.
Yeah, I think that's a good offer.
I was gonna like before Matt said anything, I was thinking 2 2s. But 201 kind of
is
overrules
that is 2
sure.
mid twos.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I think you're like T is a pretty polarizing player, and I think you catch somebody that's like, oh no, he's just this or that.
It just reminded me. So the counter was from the Brian Thomas. They offered me for Brian Thomas, and that was my counter. So they offered me Puka for Brian Thomas, and I had to throw in Pop, and I declined that, or I countered with T, the 201 and Pop. Anyways, I was curious on the thoughts on that offer.
So his counter was less about being realistic and more about like probably being like passive aggressive, like
T.
hey,
he added in Michael Penix.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So my buy of the week is going to be JMO. So a couple kind of like games. I still think JMO is a guy that can be a big splash play every now and then for 20 points. I think he's better than like what the consensus of people think. But the problem is that the people that have him might be like Team JMO. There's a few guys like that where it's like JMO, like I think George Pickens kind of has a following kind of similar where it's like we just love this guy and we're never going to trade him. But they've had him for a while. They've had a game here and there where it's been good. JMO is someone, can you get him in that? He's probably a little bit more expensive than Josh Downs. So it's probably closer to like, if we're talking about 2s, probably like 3 2s. I wouldn't want to pay like a late first for him or anything, but can you send away like maybe a running back, like a James Conner and like a couple 2s or something like that? I haven't really thought through my buy price too well, as you can tell, but JMO is someone that's interesting me. I still think that there's like top 25 wide receiver upside for him.
I think, that's an interesting one to me. And maybe this has changed, but like a couple weeks ago, it like everyone needed a 1 if they're moving JMO, but maybe to your point, like that is shifting. And at that point, if you're taking like a somewhat dead end asset plus a couple seconds or whatever the case is for JMO with some upside, I think it's a fun one.
I almost sent you a JMO offer this afternoon, Todd.
There we go. You can send it on over. So I have made one JMO trade. I think it was maybe like 10 days ago or so. I traded away Kincaid I'm a tanker. Kincaid, I think almost all my trades are on tankers because like it's just easier to trade when you're tanking. You just like don't give a shit. So I traded away Kincaid for JMO and what is trending towards being the 202. So Kincaid for JMO and the 202. And I'm
that's an awesome
pretty much
trade.
way out on Kincaid at this point.
Is that the variance?
Our
variance
friend from the Discord,
right?
Our friend from the Discord, Mike G0303, he did not like that trade for me. He was very, very much against it. Brian's in that league, so yeah, he thought I got shelled, which maybe I did.
I just have never been that big on Kincaid either, so maybe that's coloring it, but I think that's a great trade.
All right, well then we'll finish with that. Sell Kincaid. For anything. I mean, at this point, I don't know if you get anything for him.
Cue the music.
All right,
Todd made a great trade.
Market Watch. All right, thanks for joining the Dynasty Market Watch, where yesterday's price is not today's price. You can find us on Twitter. You can find Matt at Dynasty Peasant, Brian at Brian_O'Leary1, and I'm Todd at Dynasty SFlex. If you want to join the Discord, message one of us. We'll get you in. It's free. Thanks for joining.
Imaginary players, they make coach right. Master recipe.